This is the Roland SP404MKII, and we all know it's great for hip-hop, but will it reggae? What is up, Greedy Guts? It's your boy, Big Umami, and today we're back with yet another installment of Will It, a series in which I pick one particular groove box and I find out how good it is for producing one particular genre of music. And today we're covering a genre that, maybe with good reason, I don't see being produced on hardware all that much, and that's reggae. Alright, so let's start laying some drums. I've loaded a kick, followed by some hats, and just a bunch of different snares, some percussions as well. One of these snares I just want to drench in reverb, because it's always useful to have it in a reggae song. Maybe this one. I'm using the reverb effects and playing around with the EQ until it sounds almost like a plate type of reverb. I'll tell you what, the old school SX reverb actually sounds better. So I'm gonna resample this and replace the dry sound. Let's build a pattern now. The tempo is going to be a nice laid-back 70 BPM. Press remain to enter TR rec. Let's change the length to 4 bars. And let's start with the hats. The first thing that we're going to do is lay some on the offbeat, because, I mean, it's reggae. Next, we're going to add some more softer hi-hats all around the offbeat. Another thing that makes reggae, well, reggae, is the use of kick and snare at the same time. Let's add some tambourine and some cabas as well. This is starting to sound right to me. It's a basic rhythm, and we're probably gonna have to work on some variations later on, but it's a solid base, so let's move on. Let's work on our main organ sound. I'm loading a single note from my pack Big Umami Bombs Volume 2. I'm using this pack extensively today. In fact, most of the drums you just heard are from this pack. So if you like what you're hearing, make sure that you go and visit bigumami.com. I'll post the link below. Anyway, I'm using this sound called organetta. Once it's imported, I'm gonna have to figure out a way to make chords out of it. If we go into chromatic mode, we can hear all the different notes, but we can only play one at a time, which is annoying. Fortunately, I decided to play a simple A minor, G major progression, because I'm a basic B. And also, I mean, it sounds good. It's a classic reggae progression. We're gonna have to make copies of all the notes that we're gonna need for our chords. For the A minor chord, we'll need an A, a C, and an E. This sample is already a C, so we'll now set an A at -3. Next, we need an E. I could choose this higher E above the C, but I prefer the lower one. For the G chord, we're gonna need a G, a D, and a B. I'll go -5 for the G and -1 for the B. Once again, I don't want the D note to sound too high, so I'm actually inverting it, choosing the lower register one. Also, we're gonna need a low A and a low G. I can't get to them without resampling the C an octave down first. So I'm gonna do that, copy it, and then shift it down another -3 for the low A and -5 for the low G. So now that we have all of our notes laid out, this is the kind of phrase that I want to play. And we can go a step further and resample these three or these three as a chord in a single pad, but honestly there's no need. I leave them like that for now, and hopefully I won't exceed the 32 voices of polyphony while recording the patterns. But I'm pretty sure I won't. I'm gonna record this as is, no quantization, because I wanna try and make it sound as natural as possible. Next, in another bank, I'll import another sample from my pack. It's called TG, and it's a nice old school organ sound. There's nothing much to do here, maybe add some effects to it later on. This is gonna serve as my main melody. In the same bank, I also add another sample called piano organ, and this will serve as a nice counter melody. Now, I kind of want a piano to replicate the same chords as the organ, to use like stabs in order to accentuate some moments and leave a trail of delay behind. I'm choosing this sound called Queasy from my pack, and here we go. Now, let's talk about recording some guitar. I'm gonna press Shift plus X source to open up input settings. Then I'm gonna press the value knob to select a nice amp for my guitar. Unfortunately, on the SP404, there is no way to record external inputs during playback, and that means I'm gonna have to record as many chords and notes as possible, and then I'm gonna use them as single shots. And I'm gonna have to do the same thing for my bass, so I'm gonna record just a single note on it. Now that I have the full recordings, I'm gonna slap some compression on them, and of course for the bass I'm also gonna cut the high frequencies in order to make it nice and subby. Then I'm gonna slice the single notes in order to use them in the sequencer. Now you might notice some popping sounds. And that's because on each of my slices my release is set to 0. Why is it set to 0 though? Well, because every time I try and turn it up, this happens. It's a weird sort of aliasing sound, not sure what it is, but it happens quite a lot, especially on basses. It's super annoying and I would love for Roland to fix this in a future update. Don't worry though, we're gonna smooth this out with yet another filter later on in this video. Okay, now that we have all the sounds and the main patterns done, it's time to do some mixing and get creative with some effects and resampling. The first thing that I want to do is to work on the drums. They sound good, but I'm looking for some more spice, or I guess you can say, some extra umami. Now, I'm gonna make sure that bus 1 and 2 run in parallel, and I'm gonna route just the kick to bus 1, then I'm gonna route everything else to bus 2. Back to bus 1, I'm gonna put an EQ on it and make it sound a bit beefier. On bus 2, I'm gonna open up cassette simulation. And I mean, just listen to that. My god, that's pure gold. This is one of my favorite effects on the SP404. It just gives the drums that old school roots sound that is perfect for this style. I'm gonna resample this loop on bank F. Oh, and by the way, I managed to solo the drums by pressing Shift plus reverse plus tapping on all of the pads that I want to mute. So basically, I muted all the sounds that I don't want. I'm not aware of any solo function on the 404, so this will have to do. I'm also gonna add some effects to the rest of the tracks. I'm going back to using effects in series, so I can apply 2 at a time. I'm definitely gonna use some more cassette sim on the main organ. Gonna turn the hiss down, because we already have plenty of that on the drums. But I'm gonna definitely keep the wobble and the distortion. I'm also gonna add some reverb, just a touch. For the main melody, I'm gonna add an autopan and yet another cassette simulation. For the secondary melody, I'm using a very slight reverb. For the bass, in order to get rid of all of those pops, I'm actually using a filter again, and that also gives me an even more subby sound, which, you know, it's actually great for reggae. Finally, for the guitar parts, I'm gonna use an auto wah and a phaser. because, I mean, it sounds awesome. Now, I've resampled pretty much all of my tracks, but this is sounding quite dry, so this next step is a pretty crucial one. I want my drums to go through just the reverb, which will be on bus 2, and I want my keys and guitars to go through bus 1 and 2. Bus 1, in fact, will have a tape echo on, which I'm planning to use live. So for each track, I need to assign them either to bus 1, bus 2, or no bus. For example, the bass will actually go straight to the main output. You can tell straight away that even the smallest amount of reverb made this beat sound so much better. And now we can actually also play around with the tape echo, which is a lot of fun. For the master effects, I'll put some compression on bus 3, and on bus 4 I'll finally put a vinyl sim. Also, I've created a few different patterns and variations off camera, arranged it all nicely, so I reckon it's finally time to jam. It's now time for my favorite section. Let's vote. Let's talk about usability first. Look, reggae, especially the old school kind like rocksteady or dub or roots, is not necessarily the easiest genre to produce on a groovebox. Ideally, you would need live musicians, a DAW or a tape recorder, and a desk with some old school outboard to actually achieve that particular sound. And so a more modern subgenre like reggae would have been probably easier to make on a groovebox. And I can do that in the future, I guess, but what can I say, I do like my old school reggae. Anyway, putting that aside, there are a couple of major drawbacks when using the SP404MKII to make this type of music. First, you can't play chords in chromatic mode. You have to, resample the single notes, or maybe just, copy them just like I did, and then you can play them in normal pad mode. which is kind of a pain, honestly. Secondly, there is no way to do glissandos or even like legato on chromatic mode, which is kind of a shame, honestly. Also, speaking of playing melodic type sounds like bass or leads or chords or whatever, there seems to be a glitch or a problem when using the envelope. In fact, as you heard a few moments ago, if you don't turn up the release at all, you get some popping sounds, which is to be expected. But if you do turn up the release, then you get that kind of aliasing sort of effect, especially on bass sounds, which sounds even worse than, you know, the pop that you can hear when the release is all the way down. So either way you want to use it, you get some artifacts, again, especially on the bass sounds, which is, yeah, not acceptable, honestly. Again, hopefully Roland fixes all of this with the next update. Fingers crossed. Third and final issue, you can't really record any external instruments while in playback mode. So if you have a pattern and you want to record some chords over it, you can't really do it. Again, there are some workarounds. You can play to a metronome, or you can record the single notes and use them as single shots, but that's not ideal. And that's a shame, because the guitar amp emulation on the SP404 is actually pretty good. For these reasons, I'm gonna give the 404 a 4. Again, I do recognize that this particular genre is a tough nut to crack, but I really believe that with some minor adjustments, the whole making reggae on an SP404MKII could be a much better proposition. Moving on to sound. Need I talk about vinyl sim anymore, or cassette sim for that matter? Not really. Everybody knows that if you want to get that old school, washed out, worn out sound, these two effects are your best friends. And cassette sim, this time around, really especially impressed me the most. But of course, if we're talking specifically about reggae effects, you're gonna need a couple of things. First of all, you're gonna need a good reverb, either a plate or a spring reverb. And secondly, you're gonna need a nice delay. Dub delay is what they're called, but they're basically tape delays. And well, the 404 doesn't have a plate reverb, nor does it have a spring reverb. But you can get some really good sounds with the algorithms that are actually on the SP404 just by playing around with the EQs. Is it anything that will scream reggae to you? Not necessarily, but you will get some good results out of what you have on this machine. Fortunately though, the 404 actually has a tape echo. Does it sound exactly like the OG Space Echo, also produced by Roland? Well, no. Does it sound good though? Yes, it sounds awesome. It sounds great. I have no issues with that. So all in all, I will give sound a solid 8. Not perfect, but really, really, really good. That cassette simulation by itself is worth using this machine for producing reggae in any way, shape or form you deem fit. Anyway, that brings the overall vote to a 6. You can make great reggae on this machine. It's just a bit of a pain in the ass, basically. And that's it for today. I had a lot of fun making this video, and hopefully you did as well. If you enjoyed this, please consider liking and subscribing. And what about that sample pack which I used throughout the whole video? Doesn't it sound just awesome? So if you think it sounds good, please go to bigumami.com and yeah, you can find it there. And yeah, I'll see you next week. Yeah, love you.